For 199 days, Soviet and German forces had battled for the city of Stalingrad. On February 2nd, 1943, the exhausted and near-starving German forces surrendered, and the Soviets celebrated a major military victory. The city that bore the name of their leader, Joseph Stalin, had been saved. Hitler's army had suffered a crushing defeat, which would ultimately change the course of the Second World War. Remembered today as one of the largest and bloodiest battles in human history, the Battle of Stalingrad is the main event of 1943. In the summer of 1942, the Germans commenced Operation Blue, an offensive aimed at capturing the oil-rich Caucasus region in the southern Soviet Union. As the operation began, Hitler ordered an attack on Stalingrad. Stalingrad was an industrial city set on a major shipping route, the Volga River. As the German armies advanced, heavy air raids began. But Stalin was determined to save the city. He prevented civilians from evacuating and ordered them to assist in the city's defense. On August the 23rd, a massive German air bombardment killed thousands and turned Stalingrad into a landscape of ruins. The Soviet Air Force was swept aside by the Luftwaffe. In late September, the Soviets poured air reinforcements into the Stalingrad area, but their terrible losses continued. The Luftwaffe had complete control of the skies. German armies soon reached the Volga River to the north and to the south of the city. By October, the Soviets could only reinforce and supply their forces in Stalingrad by perilous crossings of the Volga, under constant bombardment by German artillery and aircraft. Amid the debris of the wrecked city, the Soviet armies anchored their defense lines with strongholds in houses and factories. As the Germans pushed forward, the battle for the city descended into one of the most brutal in the Second World War. Bitter hand-to-hand fighting raged for every street, factory, and house. Areas captured by the Germans during the day were retaken by the Russians at night. Battles for some factories, such as the Red October steel factory, raged on, becoming ever more fierce and gruesome. As autumn set in, the German forces began to face exhaustion. The Italian, Hungarian, and Romanian units also suffered from inferior training, equipment, and low morale. In November, the Soviet army unleashed Operation Uranus, a plan to encircle the German forces and supply Stalingrad with just enough resources to draw in, hold, and exhaust the German army, led by Friedrich Paulus, while the Soviets built up their forces with fresh troops and new equipment. As the harsh winter closed in, more than 250,000 Axis soldiers were cut off from supplies. They now faced continuous Soviet ground attacks, starvation, and the freezing Russian winter. On February 2nd, 1943, the German forces surrendered. 91,000 tired, ill, and starving German troops were taken captive and marched to prison camps. 27,000 of the prisoners died within weeks. Most of those that reached the camps were killed by overwork and malnutrition. Only 5,000 survivors returned to Germany in 1945. Friedrich Paulus became the highest-ranking German officer ever to have been captured. Hitler had believed that Paulus would take his own life. Choosing to live, Paulus went on to sign anti-Hitler statements which were broadcast to German troops. With an estimated 1.5 million people having been killed or injured on both sides, the Battle of Stalingrad was one of the bloodiest in human history, and it remains the main event of 1943.